Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Cinematic Realms. I'm your host, John Webster, and with me, returning this week is, pointing that way, Amy Blackfyre, and my co-host from Here Be Dragons, Stephen Stark. Welcome, guys. We're going to be talking about the film Hero today, which I think we're all pretty excited for. Maybe one of us just a tiny bit more than the others, but I think we're all pretty psyched.
Definitely, yeah. Those that know me know that I study Chinese literature, so Chinese cinema, like, sign me up. Anytime John does a China movie, if I'm not here, you guys have been robbed. So,
yeah, and everybody knows I love my hero stories. So, what better film to be on than Hero?
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but and I'm sure, Amy, you have a much different, like, first time seeing this film than Stephen or I will. But just for me, it was. I'll admit I feel kind of guilty because I didn't necessarily come to it for its own sake. It was during the time when, like, a movie like this, if you wanted to really push it, the studio felt the need to have the release, I guess, presented is the word they chose, by Quentin Tarantino to sort of bank on the whole Kill Bill phenomenon.
yeah.
And so a lot of that for me was coming from that, seeing the previews that said Quentin Tarantino presents Hero. But if that's what it took to get some people into the theater, I think it was worth it, because I walked out of this immediately thinking I'd seen one of the greatest films I'd ever seen. Yeah, just Stephen, what was your reaction when you saw this?
So, all right, I immediately was comparing it to Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which was my favorite movie of that year, which was, what, 2 years before this? Maybe, I think it was 2 years. I think Crouching Tiger came out in 2000.
Yeah.
At any rate, so I was immediately comparing it to that movie. And I don't know that the first time I saw it, I felt like it quite had the same standard, but subsequent viewings have made me really appreciate it on an artistic level that I probably didn't after one viewing. But, which is still to say, my first time watching it, I enjoyed it very, very much. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, I think that for me, maybe it's because I wasn't as wowed by Crouching Tiger as a lot of people were, at least initially. I came to this, and I think the fact that it had such an epic scale to it, and this was during the years when I was still super. I say that like I'm still not, but I was really hyped up by Lord of the Rings still during that period. And so I loved things with epic scale, but this had it had great ideas to think about, and the colors, the cinematography that was used, everything was just beautiful. But Amy, I'm sure that you came to it with a whole different set of just perspectives and maybe expectations. And what was it like for you seeing this film?
I actually originally watched it just because it was a Zhang Yimou film, because he's the Steven Spielberg of China. And I noticed that Anna asked if it's a Hong Kong Chinese movie or Taiwanese Chinese movie, which is a very important distinction. So your Taiwanese movies are going to be like your Ong Lee, Lust, Caution kind of movies. The mainland Chinese / Hong Kong, Hong Kong, they are separate. Don't at me, Chinese government. So they tend to do a lot more of this wushu martial arts film. And so I actually saw House of the Flying Daggers before this. I'm going to date myself. You guys know I'm younger than you. I was too young in 2002 to appreciate this. But I first saw House of the Flying Daggers, and I thought, I need to watch everything Zhang Yimou I can possibly get my hands on. And so then I watched Hero, which is still my second favorite Zhang Yimou film, because House of the Flying Daggers will always have a special place in my heart. But when I first watched it, because I know the actual story of the attempted assassination of the who was then the king of Qin and then later became the first emperor of China. I was like, that's not historically accurate. But then I really decided to just kind of enjoy the film for its storytelling elements. And I think what really struck me, which I know we're definitely going to talk about, is this idea of kind of this unreliable narrator, or the whole time you kind of like, oh, so that's what happened. And then all of a sudden it's, oh, no, wait, that's not what happened. Scrap everything you just saw. And that's what I really like about it, is that you have to actively engage with the narrative and try and realize what actually is the story behind these three assassins that Nameless supposedly defeated, right? So I think that constant rethinking of the narrative is interesting, and it really reminds me of this idea of historiography. How is history told? How are stories told? And I think that's really, in the end, what this movie is about. If I were to write my thesis, right, the thesis statement would be that this is about historiography and unreliable narration. And I think that's, other than wushu, other than the colors, other than Zhang Ziyi giving me feels, it's a great commentary on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, because even though that's definitely a big feature of the film, I don't know, and that's personally what I come away from it saying what it's about. But I like that. I'm trying to think of where to start with this thing, because it's, I mean, I guess we can kind of start with giving an overview of the story, which maybe it might be interesting to do that from a historical point of view first. So yeah, or Stephen,
you want to tell us about the Warring States period of China?
A little bit, yes, actually.
All right, let's do this.
I mean, I love my history in general, but like this time in China, ooh, look at that cast.
I feel so much every
they
time
were
I
like, let's find the 5 most beautiful people in China.
Exactly, and just put them in this movie. Yeah,
right.
And let's give them gorgeous costumes and amazing hairstyles. Thank you, Zhang Yimou.
Yeah, the two kingdoms kind of particularly is featured in this film are Zhao and Qin.
Zhao.
I mean, I'm an American. I'm going to do my best. I do all right.
You do. You said Zhang Yimou correctly on the last Derby Dragon stream, and I almost fell out of my chair. I was so happy.
But I do know that although his name is never spoken in the film, the king is Qin Shi Huang, who is the first emperor of China and did go on to not build the Great Wall, but start the Great Wall anyway. Wasn't built in one generation. But he also kind of went crazy towards the end of his life. But he also did, he did conquer all the kingdoms, but then he did sort of standardize the writing. And there was a lot of swordplay and penmanship or calligraphy in this film. And I know Amy's going to go nuts talking about that here in a second, but
if I could just talk a little bit about, so yes, in this film, it is Zhao versus Qin, but actually in the original, historical situation, it was actually Qin versus Yin, which was the most northeastern state, which is around Manchuria, around the Beijing area. And so I'm not quite sure why they changed that, but Zhao was much closer to Qin than Yen was to Qin. So maybe that idea of the border disputes. And yes, he started drinking the Qin Shi Huang, which literally means the first emperor of Qin. At this time, he would have been called King Zheng because he was not yet the emperor. That's unnecessary pedantry. But basically, there were 7 states at this point, and each had their own system of writing, their own language, even within that state, many different systems going on. And so one of the things that, shows in here is he goes, there are 18 ways to write a character. When I take over, I will standardize the writing. And the characters we have today are these standardized characters that King Zheng and there was talking about. So at the time, China was basically 7 different states with different loyalties and different ways of living and different cultures. And this was a time when there was constant warfare. So this is a little bit, it's about 400 years after Confucius, but what Confucius was writing right before the Warring States period. And that was when basically there was no China. You were a Yen person or a Qin person or a person of Chu. You were not Chinese. And a lot of what this story is about, they mistranslate it to our land. It should be all under heaven. But this idea of tianxia, we are all under heaven and we are all one people. That did not come until after King Zheng then became Qin Shi Huang and was the first emperor of China. And Stephen is right. Other than just the I will correct you slightly on the Great Wall, Stephen. There were already walls built by each state, and he connected the walls and built new ones, which you can learn about in my essay about the Great Wall, which you can
there you go.
Links in the description. And
that
so
is not unnecessary pedantry.
It's a small thing. He also did standardized weights and measures so that money, right, currency, and also how much something weighed and how much something was worth, it didn't change from state to state. It was the same throughout the country. So he did a lot of standardization, but he was in many ways a tyrant, and he was a dictator, really. And he would say, if he were here today, and King Zheng says in the story, right, it's necessary for it. And yes, he did, Anna. Mercury is an important part of Taoist elixirs, and he believed that mercury would make him live longer when it actually shortened his life and made him go crazy. Fun, very fun way to go. There's a great story about him walking with he was traveling, he was doing, kind of like a royal progress, and he had all this like wagons behind him, and he stopped the whole wagon train. He said, there's a sea monster in this lake and I'm going to kill it. And he had his harpoon, and he's at this point, the emperor. You're not going to say emperor, you're hallucinating. No, they had to be like, yeah, there's totally a sea monster there. You're totally going to get it. And so he just, for hours, was throwing his harpoon into the wall, like, oh, I almost got it. Oh, I almost got it. And that's like what they had to do because he was the emperor, right? They just had to humor him. And yeah, he did. The mercury made him go crazy, unfortunately. But he did, in the end, when we say China, that comes from Qin, his state. He's the reason that China is the way it is, which is why I think this attempted assassination that was not successful is so interesting in Chinese history. If Jing Ke, the original assassin, the actual historical figure, if he would have succeeded, Chinese history would have changed forever. Think JFK assassination, right?
Or maybe even
assassinated, everything changed.
Or maybe even more not destructive, but maybe it would have even larger change than that. China is never the same after this. I mean, it breaks apart and comes back together a few times along the way, but this idea of anytime in the future when it breaks apart, each piece feels like it's the rightful heir to the whole. This idea of a unified China is born really out of this story and is part of their national identity to this day, over 2,000 years later.
You also have the title of emperor, right? Before he was Wang, he was king, and now he is Huang, which means emperor. So there was a title to fight after him, right? Before then, you were just king of this area and you'd conquer other kingdoms, but you'd still be the king. But now you become the emperor. He was the one who basically coined his name of emperor. And this is a very tiny thing. It's kind of interesting, though. It literally refers to the North Star because he is the guiding light of the Chinese people. So that's what Huang kind of refers to. It's a celestial body. And it also shows his connection with heaven. The emperor is also called the Prince of Heaven, Tianzi, right? So that by being the son of heaven, right, he has the divine right to rule all people, but that was only an idea after the first emperor of Qin, right? And so you're absolutely right, Stephen, in that this changed, he changed China forever, and that after that, even though China would go apart, it would come back together under this idea of a son of heaven.
Okay, so I do want to sort of since now we've talked about sort of the backstory, bring it to the beginning of the film, and the story is set up that the main character played by Jet Li, Nameless, has killed the three most dangerous assassins. So this spoiler alert, the we've already kind of gone there, but the story ultimately is about his quest to assassinate the king. But the story sets it up as though he's actually killed the assassins. But as will be revealed, that's not quite the truth. And what unfolds is he's brought before the emperor and he begins to tell his story. And again, Amy, as you were saying before, what's really interesting about this is that we get the story in sort of multiple different ways from different perspectives. And what I love about the film itself is the cinematography lends each version of the story a different color palette. You know, the way the film is shot, and I mean, just the first version. Well, it's not quite the first story that's told, but the first version of the story that we'll hear multiple times is all in red colors, and I think that's really beautiful because Nameless is telling this story of these characters who, in this version of the story, they're sort of, I guess, weak-willed and very passionate and all that. So I think red is a fitting color for that version of the story. But you'll see this throughout the film. Do one of you guys want to talk some more maybe about the look of the film for a second? I've actually dropped my mouse, so I'm going to go get it. So I actually have not been able to go through any pictures, so I'll be right back.
Go fetch your mouse. I'll say this. One of the things that struck me beyond just the color palette, especially this time, is each section also has its distinct camera movement. And yet that's part of the cinematography, but in the very first portion, in the red scenes, there's a lot of the camera doing this type of thing. Whereas in the more blue scenes, there's a lot of still camera is fixed. Whereas in the white scenes, you get more overhead shots. You get more, well, I mean, there's plenty of overhead shots in the battle, but yeah, in the white scene, there's more of you have wider landscape type shots and whatnot. So I just thought the fact that they even placed the camera differently and moved it differently in each section it's really just brilliant from the top down. And I guess if you want to start from the beginning, the real beginning is the fight with, yes, this fight right here with
Sky. Sky is the name of the assassin, yeah. Also, shout out to that Weiqi board, also known as Go, behind them. They translate it as chess, but it's different from chess, and I know how to play, and it's very fun.
Yeah. It's, but this fight, it's the first fight in the film. I also think it's the best fight in the film. Donnie Yen is incredible at what he does. That's the spear wielder.
It's really, I feel like this opening scene really is a showcase for how amazing both Donnie Yen and Jet Li are. It's a fantastic fight. And I want you to go ahead and finish your thought, Stephen, because actually I want to backtrack, and I was going to save this for later, but I really do want to talk about the music sort of throughout. So go ahead before I interrupted you.
Well, people that know me well, and I do my military thing, and I like the fight scenes, and I like action sequences, and we'll get to the military part later when we get to the House of Calligraphy, but this fight, between sword and spear, is so good. Yes, it's very stylized, but a lot of the there's wire work, and obviously they're flying around, but the actual sort of utilization of the weapons is very good. You may not know this, but Jet Li is an actual kung fu champion. He's when he was a teenager, he won national championships in China. And Donnie Yen is also a very accomplished martial artist, like an actual martial artist. Everyone else in this film is a Chinese actor, and a lot of Chinese actors have sort of basic fight training because of the market for these type of films in that industry, but they are not martial artists. These two men are, and it really shows in the economy of their movement, in their speed, in the way they can mix things up. It's incredible. And I love the spear. The spear is a soldier's weapon. The sword is a weapon for self-defense. The spear is a weapon for killing other people. Donnie Yen really utilizes the reach of the spear very well in this. And of course, Jet Li's maneuver of killing him actually probably is not very good against a spear, which tells you Sky had to let him do it, which we get to eventually. But yes, this fight is a masterpiece of the wushu style, from the sort of flowing movements of them to the way they're like balancing on the edge of a wall or doing a splits upside down between two rafters, and the music, as you say, the music set to this, and where they start the fight, and then the old man packs up his Amy. I don't know. There you go. Say it again.
Guqin.
There
you
you
can just
go.
call it a qin if you want.
Okay. Well, he packs up his qin, and they stop and respect. They pay him. Please play for us. And the discussion about the similarities between swords or between fighting and music and the subtleties and the feeling the rhythm is so good. Were swords with slits ever a real thing? Absolutely, they were. That is called a fuller. Most of the time, they don't go all the way through, but they did occasionally have fullers that went all the way through the blade.
A slit. What exactly does she mean by slit? I'm a little confused.
So Nameless's sword has a sort of narrow hole.
Oh, okay. I got you. And also, Leaf, the tassel that is on the spear is also traditional to have a tassel on a spear. It's usually white or red, and I believe it was white in this scene. And you'll notice that the soldiers of Qin have a red one.
Yeah. Well, but it was also a lot of times the reason it's either white or red is because if you stab a bunch of people with a spear, eventually it gets bloody and it comes down, and now your hand is slipping and sliding up and down the haft of your spear. If you have a wrap of fur around it, then you don't get your hands all bloody. And when it turns red, your enemies know you've really been doing your stabbing,
All right. Just really quick, Amy, since I'll butcher the name, I'll leave this to you. The choreographer that Anna is mentioning, here's his name, but I'm going to say it wrong. So,
Yuan Wuping.
Yeah. I mean,
Yuan. Just call by his last name. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. And yeah, this fight scene is off the charts. And actually the beginning of this scene with the music, there's a lot of drums that feature, and it reminds me a lot of the music from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon in the beginning with the rooftops and everything. And it is the same composer, Tandun, or Tandun. I'm maybe get the name wrong, but he's the same composer that did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And this is actually the score that I prefer, although they're both absolutely beautiful scores. But I do want to talk about the music a bit and reaching back to the first scene of the film, because what's interesting is a lot of the music is it's really tied in with what's going in with the story in a way that maybe the first time through you might not get, and maybe even on subsequent viewings, because there's really two primary themes in the film. There's some different motifs, but the major two themes are, you've got the main theme, which is on the soundtrack. On the soundtrack, it's called For the World. It's pretty much associated with Nameless. Whenever he's around, like especially towards the end of the film as he's walking away, and it's that main music. There's another theme which is, I guess you'd call it a love theme, between trying to make sure I get the names right, Snow and Broken Sword. And But what's interesting is as the film opens up and Nameless is sitting there in the carriage, the theme that's playing is the love theme. It's not his theme. And that should tell you right off the bat that he has a connection that's more than just adversarial with those characters. And he's sitting there and you're kind of focused on him giving that open narration, but he's actually sitting there looking at the boxes in front of him with the weapons. He's really contemplating what he's going to do. And so it's telling you right off the bat that there's a lot going on there. And it's interesting, the first time we see him, it's not even his theme music that we're hearing. And then, sorry, I am geeking out about the music, but especially once we get to the next scene with the fight between him and Sky, is that once it goes into the battle that's in their minds, the music that's being played by the old man, actually, if you pay attention closely, it is the love theme. And so that represents both Broken Sword and Snow. And what's going on there, at least in my opinion, is that you've got this first part of Nameless's plan that he's enacting, but even now you're hearing their love theme in the background being played. And so it's a conflict between where he's ultimately going to end up and what he's focusing on right now, which is his mission. And then once that theme sort of reaches all levels of chaos and the instrument breaks, he proceeds with his mission. So for now, he's still on his path. And I'll stop there for now. But the music is very interesting, and because what I've told about his music, the theme music for Nameless, it's not even completely his theme. You'll see as it kind of merges with Broken Sword, especially as it carries on, and so it becomes sort of, it bounces between the two, so that by the end of the film, Nameless's mission becomes Broken Sword's mission. Sorry. Okay, there's some rambling on.
And one thing to keep an eye out in this movie is what is known as the Confucian scholarly pursuits, and one of them are playing board games such as Go, which was shown in the first scene, martial arts. I mean, that's in everything. Playing the Qin, specifically what that guy was playing, is known as a scholarly instrument. Calligraphy is another one, which we will see in this movie. So this movie is also a display of kind of this cultural scholarly pursuit theme that's going on as well, which I don't think really, other than Chinese people that are more familiar with Chinese culture, I don't know if they would catch it. But it definitely, whenever, especially when we get to talking about calligraphy and swordplay and how in Chinese culture they're considered one and the same and very connected, I think I'll be able to describe a little bit more why this is important for this film in particular.
Yeah, so...
And they also were asking about the slits in the sword in the chat, asking, is this so that you could, take the blade away from someone? I also maybe think if there has air in it, can't you be faster in your thrusting? What do you think, Stephen? What's the use of that?
I don't know how historically accurate that is. Most of my knowledge about weapons is based in the Western world. It's definitely a thing that has been done before. What's the practicality? How common was it? I really can't speak about that. And usually when you grind material away from the inside of a sword, it is not it's not to make it lighter. I mean, it does make it marginally lighter, but what it really does is it creates, when you stab someone, it creates a sort of void so that you don't have all this suction. You can pull the blade out easier. That's what a fuller down the length of the blade is for. I think that what we need, or I think what we have here, is an example of filmmaking doing its rule of cool.
What's that, Stephen? I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
aren't all movies perfectly historically accurate?
This
Well,
one especially just
that-
follows the Chinese history line by line. You
Right,
know,
like,
you know
there
me,
were
I've
literally-
checked.
Yeah, there was a fight on the surface of a lake where two guys just kept dipping the tips of their swords so they could keep flying. That totally happened.
And that's
Yeah.
huge in wushu films. That is
Anyway,
so many
we'll
scenes
come to that.
fighting on water. Yeah,
That has
definitely.
its own
I
thing.
don't know
going
what you're talking about, Stephen. That is totally possible.
Yeah. You have to know. You have to have your chi balanced for that to happen, though.
Oh, is that what it is?
That's what it is. Yeah,
I need to
Stevie, your
unblock
chi
my-
just isn't balanced.
I need to unblock my chakras and
definitely.
Yeah, and not to mention there's lots of scenes where you've got swords bending left and right, and
that is more possible than you might think.
Really?
High quality steel can flex a lot, and is actually somewhat desirable in a lot of cases, because overly rigid will tend to shatter under a heavy blow, whereas these type of like Chinese fencing swords, and actually you see it a lot with like the Zweihander that Teutonic Knights were famous for, would bend actually pretty dramatically and retain their shape because they don't shatter. Now, is it a bit much in this movie? Maybe at times, especially when he's like slapping Homegirl or Moon, Zhang Ziyi's character, slapping her around. Maybe that's a little bit overdone, but yeah, but flexibility in your blade is actually pretty common.
So okay, so we've talked about the first fight scene between Nameless and Sky, which in this first version that it's really the only version, but we'll refer back to it and see that there was more to it than we actually thought. But it seems pretty cut and dry that this was him, taking out the first assassin. But as we'll find out later on, they were actually working together. And I have to say, I just love the way the story progresses, because first we'll refer back to it later where we find out that, the Emperor surmises that they were working together and that Sky, must have truly believed in him to give his life. But then even later in the film, we'll discover, no, Nameless has a secret move where you can actually survive. And so Sky is actually perfectly fine. So, and again, it's just peeling back the layers every time we go into a new version. I really love that. But the first version of his interaction with Broken Sword and Snow is the version that's all in red. And I want to bring up.
And red is also, even though we think of green as the color of envy, red is also in China can also be the color of jealousy. So that's also important for this scene, where he says basically what he did was that he made Snow, who is the woman, also known as Flying Snow. He made Flying Snow basically and Broken Sword, the man, fight by having essentially what Broken Sword did was cheat on Snow with Zhang Ziyi's character, or was it a different girl? I don't quite remember.
It was
that
definitely
part.
Zhang Ziyi.
Okay, it was Zhang Ziyi. So his apprentice, basically, he slept with his apprentice, and because of that, basically, Flying Snow.
Well, yes, but he got to that point because
it starts
he
off.
He thought that Flying Snow and Sky, who we think is dead, supposedly had a thing.
In Nameless, that's what Nameless comes and tells them. Yes. And he's even got the little broken piece of the spear.
Yes. And so he says before he died, he told me, right? Sky told me that he wanted me to give this to Flying Snow. She was the only woman to ever have his heart. And so because of that, Broken Sword becomes jealous and sleeps with his apprentice. And then Flying Snow in retaliation kills a very, very like jealous, envy, kind of retaliation, revenge ridden. And that's really where the red pops out, with that kind of in the color of envy in Chinese culture being red, and also it is also the color of passion in China as well. It's also good luck, which is why during New Year's everyone has red and gold. You wear your red underwear if you're going to gamble, by the way, and that gives you good luck in China. So it can be a good color, but it also has this passion. Too much passion can be bad thing, right? Like having passion for something, like I have passion for Chinese literature, and that's a good thing. It helps me write, but it can also be too much, right? Especially when it comes to jealous lovers. So that's kind of that first scene we get where he basically, the first thing that we learn about Broken Sword and Snow is that basically they're jealous lovers kind of pitted against each other. That's what we think happens in the beginning.
Well, I will say this section is also the most violent section.
Oh, we see more blood in this
more blood and death in this particular telling.
Yes, Anna, white is associated with death in China. You got that right.
We'll get to that. Yeah, that's part of the
definitely get to that.
Like when they were choosing color palette for each of these different sections, I think they didn't just look at Chinese. I think they looked at Western color associations as well, and as well as trying to find things that would be visually distinct. And like, I mean, we'll get to it with the other ones, but each of them also has reflections in the terrain or the landscape that they're actually in. With the red, we have the fight amongst the gold turning to red leaves between Moon and Flying Snow, and then the very bloody attack on the calligraphy school, complete with red ink used to make the scroll and everything.
Yeah.
And again, with the I'll be briefer this time, but just highlighting the music in that scene where Nameless and Snow defend the school. You really hear that main theme come full force in that scene, because it's really a scene about all three of them: Nameless, Snow, and Broken Sword. And especially once it gets to Broken Sword making the scroll, the theme is especially strong there, played. I think it's on violins for that moment. Where it's just really beautiful, and it's showing him, because that's him, laying out his, the ultimate ideal of swordsmanship, as the film refers to it. So yeah, just really bringing home the ultimate meaning of that particular theme of music, and I just can't say enough about the red in this whole sequence. It's probably a bit unfair just to say that it's the most beautiful sequence, in my opinion. It is just because, I don't know, and just especially once you get to, highlighting the red with the yellow, for the fight between Snow and Moon. Yeah, that's just, I mean, Stephen, we recently both talked about how we think that's probably the most beautiful scene in film.
Gorgeous. With the leaves.
Yes, like I said it earlier, the fight between Jet Li and Donnie Yen was the best, quote unquote, fight in the film. This is by far, in my opinion, the prettiest fight in the film. There's so much going on. The gold leaves, the bright red for both of them. It's hard to tell sometimes which one is which, other than like Flying Snow is elegant in a way that Moon is not.
Yes.
Moon is not, she's very angry, she's very aggressive, whereas Snow is always in motion, be that there's a lot of spinning that she's doing in this scene too, which I'm not sure.
I was actually going to talk about the spinning next, so.
Okay, because that the idea of circular motion is a thing that occurs over and over again in various mythologies, and I know that it's important to a lot of martial arts style. I'm not sure culturally if it means something bigger or better, but yeah, that particular fight scene is gorgeous with and there's this one shot that is from above the treetops where Moon is chasing Flying Snow, and you just see her kind of, and then you see Moon come along behind her, and it's a still camera shot with this sea of golden yellow leaves, and then these two red figures come floating through, and it's just, I don't know, it's incredible.
And and while we're on the subject of the spinning, because Flying Snow also does this to protect the calligraphy school, right? She spins and spins and spins, and she's like catching these arrows basically with her sleeves. This is huge also in House of the Flying Dagger, spinning with sleeves. And Stephen is right, this has to do with martial arts. But I would also argue, if I could do a little bit of feminist analysis here, that's my brand, it's also a bit of a hint at femininity, because in traditional Chinese dancing for women, it's the most valued move is for a woman to spin while very, very low with her sleeves and not get dizzy and keep doing it for a long, long time. And that really gets the crowd going. Like, that is amazing to have that kind of coordination. So it's also Flying Snow's graceful femininity that is allowing her to do these kinds of moves with these long sleeves, right? The guys have very kind of close to their body clothes, whereas the women have very loose fitting clothes that they can kind of swing around. And this is, I didn't say patriarchy, Kelly, but I'll go ahead and give her a drink. Cheers, fellas. But I think that's a shout out to that, but it's also, I think, a shout out to this idea of the type of martial arts that is about, yes, the dance scene and house. That's exactly the one I was thinking about, Anna. That it's also an idea of avoidance, which is a huge part of Chinese martial arts. It's not just about attacking. It's not just about defending. It's also about avoidance from attack, and which is also huge in The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which you guys might be a little bit familiar with. But this idea
I've heard of him. He's called Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu. But there is this idea that if you're not attacking or defending, you're avoiding. And that is kind of a lot of what Snow doesn't want to fight Moon. That's what she's doing a lot, is avoiding these blows. And then finally, and if I remember correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, boys, whenever the leaves change, it's kind of when I believe Flying Snow is like, all right, child's play is over. I'm going to take you down. Because Moon is not done with her. She's still an apprentice. She's not done with her training, and she's also emotional at this point. We know Flying Snow is going to kick her ass. I mean, it's obvious. And so at first she's just avoiding, and then she goes into attack, right? Which Moon has no defense against at all.
Yeah. I'm going to pop this back up, John, if you don't mind. This one right here.
Oof.
Yeah.
And then the moment that immediately follows this, where the falling leaves, every leaf changes to red.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's when it is, when she defeats her. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I misremembered it. Okay.
It's right after Moon is killed by Flying Snow. But you're right. She doesn't. It's obvious from the get-go that the only thing Moon has going for her is blind aggression, and the fact that Flying Snow is trying to, as you say, just play the neutral Jing, avoid, evade, best block, no be there, however you want to put it.
The Airbender, if we're wanting to do Avatar Last Airbender, right? The Airbenders avoid, right? Whereas the Earthbenders go straight on, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a lot of air. Every time her sword swung, a swirl of leaves, and you could see the whoosh across the leaves on the ground. Brilliant, beautiful visual storytelling.
And John, if you could just put up Nessie's comment about this feminine water motion, and this is going back to my earlier argument. in Chinese culture, women are associated with water, right? They're flowing, they are yielding, they are soft. And so, whereas men are earth, right? Unyielding, strong, warlike, right? And so I think that's also another thing with this idea of kind of elegant motion.
Very sexist, Amy. Very sexist.
According to traditional Chinese culture, just preface that. This is not what I actually think. This is what I have learned. You guys know that I think that women are, all of the elements, and you guys are just lucky to be here. So,
what's really interesting to me just about this whole part of the story is that Nameless is telling the story which he thinks the Emperor will be receptive to, and it's painting all of the characters, but particularly I think it's telling that he's showing that these two women as being sort of very emotional and unhinged, and the fact that when she goes to fight Nameless the next day, he says that she was unbalanced and wasn't able to focus. It's interesting, though, that I think that speaks to sort of patriarchy. That's the story that Nameless things will sort of register with the Emperor, and then the Emperor comes back and he says, "You've underestimated one person," and he's like, "Who?" And he says, "Me." Because
who's got two thumbs and didn't get fooled. Right,
this king who's about to become an emperor and rule all of China. Yeah.
Because he actually has a better handle on
the king has faced them before.
He's faced them, and he saw them as measured, calm, honorable,
strong martial artists. Yeah. And like Sun Tzu says in The Art of War, half the game is your mental state, right? If you can get the enemy off their game mentally, then the lack of focused combat will follow.
Yeah. I really like this. What's kind of fun about the whole next sequence is that we get the Emperor's version of what he thinks transpired.
And this is all the blue scenes.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and see if I have some of those colors. Yeah.
Yes. And if you notice when they do the library scene where the king says, I guess you met with Snow and you met with Broken Sword, made this pact, all of the books are blue. Everything is blue. It's completely, and if you notice, the soldiers have blue. It's completely color palette.
Yes, all those banners were red in the red scene, and they are blue in this scene.
Exactly.
Yeah, what's actually really interesting is, as much as I love this movie, I think in previous times that I'd seen it, I had not realized that we actually see the same library in the red section, because it looked so totally different. It's like blue and white are a little closer, so it's easy to discern that they're showing us that same location with different color palettes, but I had previously not noticed that they were also in that library for the red, and it's so red. It's, And
once again, going back to scholarly pursuits, they're surrounded by the classics, right? Studying the classics is another scholarly pursuit. They have all 7 of the scholarly pursuits in this one movie. It's amazing how they fit them all in there. But learning the classics is also in there. And I love that, because when the king says, "Oh, this is how it went down in the library," if you'll notice, then they're so like Broken Sword and Snow are so like kind of composed and calm, and and all of the other ones, they're kind of like more expressive, and so it's who the king sees them as, right?
Yeah. But what's nice, what I like about this though, is it starts in this section, and then even more so in the final version that we see, where everything's white. What I like is that we start off with the red, with seeing all their passions exposed, and even though it's not the real events that happen, I think that what's interesting is that there is sort of that rash, impulsive, passionate side inside each of us. So I do think it's showing a kind of truth that it's an element of those characters. We're seeing them at probably their weakest, their most what's the word I'm looking for?
Most vulnerable.
Most vulnerable. That's better. And what's great is as we sort of move on to these later sections, we see these other facets of them. So it gives such a beautiful sort of full-bodied picture of who these people are. And so that when they are more, I think we actually like to see them more composed in this section and more in control, because we see how they falter in the previous section. So it actually endears the characters to us as we see them in different sort of their emotions in different shades. And
yeah, because
would you say we get the whole color spectrum of these characters?
Yeah. I wouldn't
Slap
say
your
that.
knee, guys.
I wouldn't say that. That's too nerdy. But you're right, John. Like in the red section, they are all the characters are very at odds with one another. Very at odds. Like, and that's Sky is really not part of the red section, but that's Broken Sword. That's Moon, because she gets rejected by Broken Sword. Flying Snow, and Nameless, because Nameless is there against all of them. He's, and it's obvious that he is. But in the blue section, I don't know what else to call it, the King's imaginings, he thinks they're all working intimately together, which is also not exactly the truth, as we'll find out before we get to the end.
Yeah.
But one of the things that struck, and maybe this is just me applying modern English like slang vernacular to it, but there is a section of this film that is white, and that is the truth. And everything else is shaded, which I don't, it's colored. When you talk about, I'm not sure how I'm trying to say this, but yeah, shading the truth is a thing that people say. It's a euphemism for, lying.
And we say that's a very colorful, explanation. It usually means it's not fully correct, right?
Because the truth is the white that is happening. But in this section, colored by the Emperor's imaginings, as I was saying earlier, a lot of times the landscapes give themselves to reflecting the color choices. And this is the section where we get the fight on the top of the lake, which is the most wushu thing you can do.
Yeah, hands down.
And it's really kind of beautiful, the way that they even set it up, talking about they didn't really want to, but honor demanded it because... Yeah,
they had to clash swords because, he allegedly killed his woman, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we could just go back to the red section for 1 second, because I feel like we're tiptoeing around calligraphy and swordplay, and I would like to just go ahead, if you guys don't mind, and dive into that just a little bit. And so there is this really, really long-held tradition in Chinese culture that someone by studying their calligraphy. There's this very, very famous calligrapher, and I'm going to type his name in the chat, named Wong Teacher. And he would have been about, here it comes, 600 years after the time we're talking about. But he's carrying on this idea, this tradition of knowing someone, knowing someone based on their calligraphy. And there's this idea that you put your heart and soul into your calligraphy, your own person into your calligraphy, so that if you were to study the calligraphy of a famous swordsman, allegedly according to tradition, you should be able to find out what their technique is, what their approach to swordplay is, and how they would, defend or attack if you were to fight them. And so a huge part of this is that Nameless goes and he asks Broken Sword to not just to calligraph or to write with ink and brush, not just any character, but specifically sword, right? And so he has him. Bye, Jolie. I love you, honey.
Bye.
So she's, specifically wants him to calligrapher one character that is a martial character, the sword, right? Would have to do with his sword play. And we find out later that whenever kind of Broken Sword looks at some records and most likely some calligraphy of the king of Qin, he realizes what needs to happen, right? There's this idea of having this epiphany by looking at the calligraphy. And there's also this idea of being able to tell someone's health through calligraphy. Wong Teacher, who I just put, and yes, that Leaf, those are the exact characters I was looking for. That's exactly what I'm going to talk about. Wong Teacher, so he was actually sickly his whole life. And a lot of people claimed that they could not find that in his calligraphy and that he was able to cover it up and that he was actually the anti-example to this idea that you can tell someone's health in their calligraphy. And so when we get here is basically essentially, in the scene, which we find out later is not exactly what happened, that Nameless was able to surmise how he could defeat Broken Sword through his calligraphy. And this goes back to a very huge cultural idea about calligraphy as a representation of the calligrapher themselves. So like we talk about how handwriting, it's all different, right? Everyone has different handwriting in the West, right? Then this is kind of a similar idea, but I would say it goes even further. It goes into your very essence, your very chi is put onto the page when you do calligraphy. So it's even more of, for lack of a better term, a spiritual look at handwriting.
What's really interesting about this is, and this is where sort of cultural differences really kind of come out and are evident, because I'll admit that the first time I saw this, when Broken Sword says the line or something to the effect of, I'd come to realize that the king, that should not be killed, and I came to realize this through calligraphy. It's a very odd sounding line to, I think, Western ears, but something that makes perfect sense in context and to Chinese audiences. But I'll admit it sounded weird to me the first time I heard it, but just hearing you talk about that, Amy, it shows how evident that would be.
Yeah.
And it's a long established tradition, and I know enough about sort of ancient Chinese culture to know that there is that link, maybe not to the level that Amy does. This lady knows her China. But yeah, there's anybody who studied swordplay will tell you it's all in the wrist. Anybody who studied calligraphy will tell you it's all in the wrist, and it's a similar control. It's
about pressure as well, not too much, the right amount of pressure on the page, right, just like the right amount of pressure with the sword.
Not underdoing it. Yeah. As you were talking about all of that stuff, Amy, I was flashing to Avatar: The Last Airbender, season 3, episode 4, Sokka's Master, where
with the space sword.
Yes, but there is definitely a scene where, when he's being trained by this sword master, he is asked to perform calligraphy.
Yeah.
And there's a great line his master has: "You cannot take back a stroke of the pen, and you cannot take back a stroke of the sword."
That is an excellent example, Stephen, and something that I think that Western audiences would be familiar with, right? The calligraphy is final, right? You have to get a new sheet of paper if you've messed up. As someone who studied calligraphy, I can tell you that is very frustrating. And because of that, you want to get as good as possible so that you can just calligrapher something really quickly, which is why in China, you'll have stalls that you can go to get your name calligraphed or whichever character you want. And it's always so impressive when they just do it really quick and it's done and you pay your, 5 yuan or whatever, and they give it to you and it's perfect. And it looks like they hardly had to think about it, right? That's a calligraphy master, where it becomes like, it shows in the movie, it shows them using a long stick and sand. That's where they're practicing, right? Because the sand, you can just wipe it away and then try it again, right? You don't have to waste ink or paper. And also another thing about red ink, right? We have it as, obviously it's the red scene, there's going to be red ink. But another thing that I think is interesting about this is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen seals that are on a paper, right? They're always in red. Red is a very official thing. And it also is saying, I put my, it's basically like a notarized signature. So it's saying like, I approve this, right? It's like the stamp of approval. So whenever Broken Sword was specifically said, I'm going to use red ink, he was also kind of making that character more of a big deal, right? More of a committed, I'm going to write this character and it's going to then represent his soul even more through red ink. So it has a double, I think it's doing two things there. It is adding to this idea of this red scene, right? But it's also adding to this idea of he's stamping his soul on the page for Nameless to then interpret.
Yeah, and this idea of calligraphy being the permanence of it is brought up even in the middle of the attack. All the students get up and start running, but the calligraphy master comes out and he says, no, this is the power of our art form. They might kill us, but our words will last forever.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful sort of notion, because as you say, like, there was not standardized writing. Writing was actually probably fairly new, and only a select few people knew it and knew how to do it well, because, you know, again, they don't have a phonetic alphabet. They have like 40,000 characters or more. Which,
what's really, I think, also important in that moment is the moment that the master comes through the door, and again, that main, talking about the music again, the theme music comes in, and it's sort of linking, you know, him telling these students what they're going to do, the fact that, you know, they can't destroy their words, and making that sort of statement. It's linking in with Broken Sword's sort of worldview, and the fact that that's when that particular music comes in. I think it really sort of lays the foundation for what's going to be important to Broken Sword. That's just a beautiful sequence.
And on a historical note, paper was not invented yet, so they were actually, if this were historically accurate, they would be using cloth. So if you make a mistake, you just wasted a whole thing of cloth that someone took a long time weaving, right? So there's even more permanence to it, right? Paper would not have been invented until about, oh gosh, here it comes, Song Dynasty, like 1900 CE, something like that, 900 or 1000 CE, right? So you had at that time cloth or bone or bamboo. That's what they would have been writing on, which would have been much more expensive than paper, which would come later. So it's even more permanent, and they had to be even more better about conserving, which is why you see them doing it with the sand. And I think what's interesting about the unmoving calligrapher, which is a very strong kind of symbol in Chinese culture, where the calligrapher sits there completely focused on their work. And in this case, to the point where they are ignoring arrows being fired at them. So once again, the scholarly pursuit of calligraphy is being shown as not only a worthy venture, but one that is meant to create awe. How could someone be so unmoving with something like that going on?
And also, I want to sort of take this moment to have some gripes about the translation of the subtitles, because they have the soldiers chanting during this portion of the film, which the US version translates as storm, which I guess is meant to denote that, you know, they're a force to be reckoned with or something, when they're actually chanting hail, which suggests paying honor to their enemies even as they're fighting against them. It's actually funny because in the original release of the film in theaters, they actually correctly translated that chant at the end of the film when they're honoring Nameless, but they removed that translation for the home video release because they realized it didn't make sense to translate the same chant in two different ways.
I actually read that as they were hailing their king of Qin back home.
Oh, really?
But and same thing in the end, they were hailing their king of Qing who had defeated this enemy who tried to kill him. So I don't know. That's a different way to read it, but I actually now totally can see it your way as well, John. This respect for the enemy, even when you know you're going to totally own them, is also a part of Chinese culture, right? And respecting them for standing their ground, basically, and honoring them being honorable in that way.
Actually, this is a good point to stop for a moment because it's a little over an hour. So
I'm going to go to the restroom while you do your thing.
Okay, cool. I am going to save a discussion of what's going on for tomorrow's stream until Steven returns so he can talk a bit about it. But I will say next week, actually, you know what? I take that back. Amy, I'm going to yield the floor to you for a second. Talk about what stuff you're working on right now.
Yeah, so I started a blog that focuses on Chinese literature and non-Western symbolism in fantasy series, specifically A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm about to start writing about his Dark Materials. I am currently working on a collab essay with Jolie, who just went to bed. She was in the chat, also known on YouTube as All Hail the Night's Queen. We're going to write about the shade of the evening trees, and we have a little theory about it that we're going to share with you guys. And we are going to possibly be joined by a special guest who is well known in the fandom. It is not confirmed completely yet, so I'm going to leave that up to you guys. But if you want to know, if you follow me on Facebook and sub to my YouTube channel, then you will be the first to know when that essay drops. So not only do I write the essays, I also read them out loud to you on YouTube so that you have no reason to say you have not read them, because you can just, on your way to work in the car, if you're not working from home, you can listen to them. And then it's like, don't even have to worry about literacy or anything. You can just see this face reading it to you. So we're currently working on that Shade of the Evening essay. I'm going to write about Varys and Chinese eunuchs soon, and also the Bloodstone Emperor. And my first His Dark Materials essay is going to be about Orientalism in the series, as well as perhaps Philip Pullman's own Orientalism. Who would have known that an older British man might have some Orientalist ideas? And so, yes, I keep my essays very short and very easy to read and understand for a Western audience. And I hope you guys enjoy. And thanks for letting me plug all of my things.
Yep, I've got all the information links in the description. So if you haven't already followed her on those, do it, because both Steven and I will come after you if you don't. And what I have coming up next week is a bit of on a sad note. I think everybody here knows that I'm a really big fan of the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. I did a stream on it with Ashea, which was fantastic. Sadly, it was announced that Netflix is not renewing the series. They announced that about 2 days after it won an Emmy and about 3 days before Jim Henson's birthday. How about that? So I'm pretty bummed about that. A lot of fans of it are really upset. So I'm going to be doing another stream about it next week, talking about the cancellation and some ideas about what might have happened in season 2, what might still happen if efforts to get somebody to pick it up are successful, or maybe it'll continue in other ways. But I will be having a new special guest for that stream, followed by the name of Cliff Broadway. If any of you followed the OneRing.net, the Lord of the Rings website, you'll know him as Quickbeam. He hosts their live show. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I've known Cliff for I guess it's a number of years now, but I've never actually gotten to speak with him one-on-one. So that'll be a lot of fun. And Steven, I think there's something going on tomorrow.
Yes, indeed. Tomorrow, we will be traveling across the Sea of Japan to be covering a Japanese movie tomorrow. The cult classic Ghost in the Shell, the anime from 1995, not the if you liked the one with Scarlett Johansson in it, I'm not going to judge you, but you should go watch the original because it is infinitely better. I saw it back probably when it first released on videotape. Yes, I saw it on VHS.
I got it at Blockbuster VHS. All right, I'm not that young. I remember getting it at Blockbuster.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't believe that.
Yeah,
but
I'm actually 15. I've been studying Mandarin my whole life since I was 1.
Now, John, you only just recently watched it, though.
Yeah, which is crazy because I also remember seeing it seeing the VHS tape in video stores, and I made this joke a while back. It was, I was really young at the time, and I saw it sitting on the shelf, and the thought that ran through my head looking at the cover was, yeah, my parents aren't going to let me rent that. But yeah, it's been one of those that I've been meaning to see for years, and for some bizarre reason, only just now got around to it. I had seen the Scarlett Johansson version beforehand, which, aside from Scarlett, really left no impression on me whatsoever. It was entertaining, but I don't really remember much about it. But
well, yeah, let's save that for tomorrow, man.
Okay, I will, but I'll just say that I saw this finally, and immediately I'm like, I should have seen this. It's a classic. It's wonderful, and we're gonna have a great time talking about it.
Oh, we are.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump back into. Sorry.
It was a place where one would go to get things called VHSs and rent them. And you were a dick if you didn't rewind, by the way. All those out there that didn't rewind, I'm looking at you.
Be kind, rewind.
Be quiet, kind of rewind. Actually, John, before we go back into the movie, this might be a good time. Could I just give a quick what actually happened with this attempted assassination in Chinese history?
Yeah.
Like the TLDR, real quick. So this guy's name was Jing Ke, and he was actually from the state of Yin, which is at the northeastern part of China. And what had happened is he befriended the Prince of Dan, so basically the prince who would eventually take over the kingship of Yin. And he went to him and had this plan where he would pretend to be an official from Yin who is going to the king of Qin to beg for mercy, basically to beg for the state of Yin to keep its existence and to not take them over, which, is futile. And they knew that. But what had happened is there had been a general who had betrayed the state of Qin. And they found this general and told them of this plan. And the general agreed to literally commit suicide and have them take his head with them as a gift to the emperor, or to the king, because that would get them close enough to him, right? And they also had a map a very, very rare map that they were going to give to him. So what happened is Jing Ke, and he had a guy with him as well, whose last name was also Qin, which is very confusing. And he had a poisoned dagger concealed in the map, so that when he walked up to I keep saying emperor because he became an emperor, to the king, he unrolled the map and then quickly grabbed the dagger and, of course, went for the king. And he grabbed his clothing and was going for the king. And one of the king's doctor, his physician, was right there. And literally, like a slapstick comedy, the physician threw his medical bag in between the two so that Jing Ke, the would-be assassin, was like kind of taken aback so that the the king could run away. And I kid you not, the next thing the king did was hide behind a rafter and did like a ooh, ooh, ooh chasing kind of scene. And finally, the king was able to draw a sword, because the problem was he had a ceremonial sword with him. In the movie, he has a normal combat sword. He had a very long, kind of like Ice from Aswaf, a very long ceremonial sword. So he finally could get it out of the scabbard, and then he basically stabbed Jing Ke like 8 times, like really bad. And with his dying breath, do you know what Jing Ke did? This is my favorite part. He spread his legs to a king, which is like a no-go in any culture, especially East Asian culture. Spread his legs, kind of like grabbed his crotch area and was like cussing at him the whole time. And that's how Jing Ke went out. And that is the actual story of this attempted assassination.
You know what? I actually want to see that movie now.
I do. And he was not buried like a hero. He was like thrown into some random grave. Like he was not hailed as a hero or anything like we have in this movie. But he was seen as obviously a traitor to, to the king of Qin. And, I think that the original story would also be really fun.
Well, but the thing is,
that physician was given 10,000 gold or something just by throwing a bag. So that goes to show you, just be by the king, and if stuff comes down, be ready to throw stuff.
Go to medical school, kids. It can pay off. But this movie is historical in the same way that something like a King Arthur story is historical. Like, it takes place in a real time and place, and maybe there are some historical characters in it, but the narrative of like what really happened, we can't know. And obviously, in 45 AD, when the King Arthur legend was starting to coalesce, I don't even know if that's the right time, but it was shortly after the fall of the Roman Empire. But at any rate, there was probably not a wizard called Merlin, casting actual magical spells and stuff. Anymore,
John, can you put an honest comment about drunk history? I'm sorry, I just love that so much. I would absolutely do a drunk history.
That would be
episode.
awesome.
I mean, I'm already kind of working on it over here, so.
But
I was about to say, isn't that what we're doing?
John, are you on the OJ yet?
No,
he wasn't prepared because this isn't a movie big about the P word that we all drink to, which I won't say for those of you at home if you don't want to drink.
But yeah, so like I forgive a lot in a film that is clearly not trying to tell a historically accurate story, and you can tell that it's not by the way that people run across the water or across the top of trees or fly through the air. Like it's not trying to present it as factual. So, like, if you're going to bend the laws of physics, I'm going to be forgiving the same way, like I forgive it for Jedis and whatnot. But
I think it has enough elements, though, like the king saying, everyone attempts to assassinate me, and these are just one more. Like, yeah, the King Jung had tons of attempted assassinations before this assassin. And the idea of I'm going to unify, all the kingdoms and create a standardized language. This actually happened. So it has enough for me personally to enjoy it and enjoy the wushu elements with the flying.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, as a matter of fact, honestly, Amy, until you started talking a couple days ago about the assassin's real historical name, I really didn't know that this was based off of a semi-true event that took place. I mean, you just figure that once it's a wushu film with all the crazy martial arts and everything, it's probably just a inspired by history, but not something that actually really took place. But I was surprised that at least that there was an assassin and that this it was attempted. Honestly, obviously, it was far different.
And it's one of the most well-known stories. Or if you ask any Chinese person, Stephen, your turn. Go ahead, dear.
On a completely unrelated topic, I just looked. John, you have 100 subscribers.
Woo!
Yes!
Yay!
Awesome!
Go, John, go!
Yay!
And anyone watching right now who hasn't subbed, like, what are you doing? Sub right now. Give them 101, 102, 103. Let's keep this going, people.
What is the purpose of your existence?
Thank you.
This is so exciting. You deserve it and more, John.
So psyched to finally get there. Thank you, guys. I love you all.
Yay!
So what were we talking about? Oh yeah, wushu elements. So like,
yeah.
So again, I said it earlier. When I saw this film for the first time, I was comparing it to Crouching Tiger, which I think Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon has better fight scenes than this film. But I think almost everything else in this movie is better. From the pacing, because this movie takes its time but never drags its feet.
And it's not a very long film. It does take its time, but I was surprised going back to it. It's only like, I think like 99 minutes or something. And which is which is even rarer nowadays. It seems like everything has to be super long.
I have to say though, Chow Yun Fat though, that's the one thing that Crouching Tiger has over this is like, I love Jet Li, but Chow Yun Fat, I am a huge Chow fangirl. Love him so much. He was great. He also played Confucius in a Chinese version of a movie about Confucius's life. And so to me, he's Confucius.
Okay. But, and as I said, I think the first time I saw this,
Ridiculous Ed.
What's up, Sean? I did not rate it as highly as I did Crouching Tiger. But as I came to like appreciate it for all the things that were not the wushu elements, that were the cinematic and filmmaking elements, I really came to get this thing is a piece of art. I mean, I think Crouching Tiger is also a very like artistic film, but this one Hero is different. It's in its own category. I don't think. I mean, Amy says she likes House of Flying Daggers better. I'm going to have to respectfully disagree. I think this might be, at least from a Western audience member's standpoint, the best wushu film ever made.
Yeah, like I'm going to agree
Oh
with
gosh,
Steven.
Jolie woke up because I was celebrating so much that you got 100 subs. Jolie, John just got 100 subs. That's what I was freaking out about, girl. I'm sorry I woke you up. You know I love you. I'll freak out about it again. Yay!
Jolie, go back to sleep. Lay down. Relax.
Shh. Those are ocean waves crossing. Shh.
I will say that I agree. I think that this is the best one for me. I also love House of Flying Daggers, and at the time, I remember the difference between the two. And actually, those two films came out with an extremely short proximity to each other here in the States, because they held off on this film until 2004 to release in theaters.
Which is House of the Flying Dagger, right?
And House of Flying Daggers was also released later that same year. So it was, Zhang Yimou mania that year, pretty much, which was great. But for me, House of Flying Daggers was the much more sort of romantic film, because you've got the story of the lovers. And actually, once we do an episode on that film, I'll talk about the music in that as well, because I think that's absolutely beautiful. But I think the fact that this film, there's a couple different things. There's the fact that it's sort of this, it's epic and it's intimate at the same time. It's got a lot of ideas to really think about, which I think House of Flying Daggers and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon deal more in personal relationships. Not that this one doesn't. This one certainly does, but it's giving, I think, the audience something to really think about and ponder about the state of the world, what they think about, the greater good versus
and sacrifice. How much are you willing to sacrifice for unity to end warfare? How much bloodshed needs to happen?
Yeah, and also I think this film is just so expertly crafted. I think every single shot is just absolutely incredible. And like I said, it's a relatively short film. It's 99 minutes, so I feel like every moment of this film needs to happen. There's sort of no fat on it.
Not a single second is wasted in this movie.
Yeah, everything feels perfectly constructed in this film, which is why I rank it number one, because I just honestly, I'll go and say my only gripes are really with the American translation. If it had,
you have gripes with the translation.
If they released a version with a completely accurate translation, I'd have zero gripes whatsoever about this film. I think I hadn't even really thought about it until this moment, but I think it's a perfect film. I don't see anything wrong with it. It's absolutely brilliant, every single second of it.
High praise coming from you, John, because you're quite the cinema.
If we're going to try to nitpick, like I'm going to try really hard to nitpick. You ready? There are one or two wirework scenes and one or two CGI scenes that are not sort of flawlessly executed.
If I can also nitpick, Zhang Ziyi needed way more screen time and lines.
Okay.
Hands down. Moon, The Apprentice. Like, they did not even go close to using her, she of course had a couple of scenes where she really got to show her, but her range of acting is just amazing. And you see this in other films. I think she's also in Crouching Tiger, is she not, Steven?
Yeah, she is like
she's in House of Flying Daggers.
And she's in House of Flying Dagger. Yeah, Zhang Yimou reuses actors when they're good, and she's good. And this was the one film I think that I've seen her in where I was like, they did not give her the room that she needed to really shine, which other movies do.
I'm gonna actually you.
Oh, I'm actually.
Yeah, actually Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is Ang Lee film.
I was talking about House of the Flying Dagger, so you don't have to actually me. But I do love it. He is amazing.
Wow, really jumping into mansplaining there, aren't you there, Steven?
Yeah,
oh, man, like
right, everyone drink for Steven's patriarch.
Yes, patriarchy.
Patriarchy. I love you, brother.
I just misunderstood what you were referencing.
You know, you're my DM. I love you so much. That means Dungeon Master, not direct message for those of you out there. He almost killed me last session, but we're still friends.
I really almost did.
You really almost did.
I'm going to sort of jump to this because I don't want to cram it in at the last minute, or who knows, we might just carry on for a while, even though I know Steven will have to probably go to the bathroom again at some point. But I'm
also hanging out with Erin in real life later, so she's waiting on me. So don't do too much.
So even more reason to bring this up now, while I've just mentioned translations. There is a pretty vital word that factors into this film, which is or 3 words.
Three words. It's not what I thought you were talking about.
I guess it is. I don't know. I know in the proper in the film, it is 2 words in the American translation, but in the proper translation, it's supposed to be,
okay. Yeah. It is this then.
It's that symbol, but it's which should be all under heaven instead.
Heaven under, all under heaven, and it's translated as our land when it should be all under heaven, as John is saying. And I will give translations now. Whenever I read Chinese literature translated, they translate it as all under heaven, kind of like the realm might be another way to put it, but our land is too possessive and too specific, whereas the realm, right, this kind of idea all under heaven of kind of the earth as at that time would have been understood by the Chinese, right?
Yeah, but like the idea is that there's these 7 warring states, and that would be our land. But what the king is really talking about, and like even said so to Nameless, that he would go beyond those 7 realms to claim all that is under heaven.
Yes. And that's the idea, is that he is the son of heaven, which uses the same character of Tian, or sky. So Tian Zi, literally the son of heaven, right? So he, of course, would have all of Tian Sha, all under heaven, right? So there is this idea that he eventually becomes the emperor, and he died before he could do these kinds of further extensions out into what would be Tibet and what we now know as Xinjiang, where the Uyghur people would be living, and of course the northern steppe tribes. At this time, not quite Mongolian, they would have been, Tartar, Tangut, Khitan, all sorts of people that unfortunately were absorbed by Genghis Khan, and we now don't know much about. So his ambitions went beyond what we know as China, which, if we're going to talk about Tianxia, which is all under heaven, China is the central kingdom, Zhongguo, what is in the kingdom that is in the center, right? The middle. They thought that they were in the center of it all, and that they could claim everything that extends out from that middle, right?
Yeah, he is basically talking about total global domination at that point.
Which is really lost in the American translation, which has been such a gripe of mine ever since.
And as well, it should be, John. I would be personally insulted if you did not have this gripe.
And plus, it's such an American thing to do too, especially within, I don't want to get too political, just as in modern politics, but really, it is kind of of course, thing where we're going to simplify something from sort of, a universal concept of everybody on the earth down to our land, as in a singular country. That is a very sort of, American perspective and point of view. And I think that's a lot of what really irked me about it, aside from it just being incorrect.
And because it's such an important concept in this movie, particularly, forget the cultural and historical, which I can't possibly do, but let's put aside the cultural and historical meaning, which is huge. Tianxia, like all under heaven, is everywhere in Chinese sources, right? Whenever Confucius talked about the land, when he was talking about not his state, because he was from the state of Lu, when he was talking about, which at our point in the movie had already been absorbed by another state, when he wanted to talk about the Chinese people proper, he said the realm, Tianxia, right? All under heaven. In this movie, the idea of all under heaven is the reason that Broken Sword, right, doesn't want Nameless to kill the king. So such an important phrase to and there are other mistranslations. For example, whenever the king finds out that Nameless wants to kill him, they're saying, and it translates to permission to kill, and they're literally just saying, sha bu sha, are we going to kill him or not? Kill him or not? Like, it's very, very much a very choppy thing, and they take it and they go, oh, permission to kill. Like, it's like, oh, please, Mr. King, might we? But they were saying, like, kill him or not, very straightforward, right? And when they say his sword is very fast, like, the Chinese is hao kuai de jian. It literally means fast sword, like very quick staccato kind of phrases that then are like overly, in my opinion, overly translated into English.
I that was something where, because I did find a transcript of the film, which I'm not sure how accurate it is, but it did have a lot of the things that I knew were correct, like all under heaven, and a lot of the sort of shorter, choppier phrases that you're talking about. And what it seemed to me that the people who were making the subtitles for this film were doing was sort of making some of the phrases more, trying to make them more eloquent, or but it's just it's really interesting. I'd love to have a truly accurate translation of this film.
I'll just teach you Mandarin, John, and then you won't need it. Don't worry about it.
Cool.
Yeah, but
Stephen. Don't worry about it.
But I griped about this last night. You'd still have that damn text on the epilogue where the final freaking words on screen for the movie are our land. It's like that's not a thing in this movie.
I'm going to totally derail you now because I'm going to talk about stuff in this movie that's awesome again.
Okay.
All right, but this is our gripe, though, audience, just so you know. The translation.
They do exist. This film, no film is perfect. But like one of the things that I noticed when I was watching it, and the more we've talked and the more I've thought about it, and the more I've kind of come to realize that this story is telling itself backwards in certain ways, and like you can only understand the beginning once you reach the very end. There are a lot of scenes where Nameless is walking away. Like there are a lot of scenes where you see him with his back to the scene that the scene is completed, but they take the time to put him in camera walking away, straight and directly away, which in the end of the film, he makes that choice to walk away, to leave the king alive to do whatever it is he's going to do. You know, many people will die, but again, it's back to this greater good, we're going to forge a mighty nation. It's just going to take a lot of blood to do it. But it is a choice he eventually makes. And they show us all the time through every different scene that Nameless is in, that eventually he's going to walk away from the Emperor. He's going to walk away from his mission that he's set himself on. And here's the thing. I actually think he walks into, I don't know if he has his mind made up before he comes or not, but even if he has his mind made up, he knows he needs to go in there. He still needs to get to the Emperor so that the story can get across, so that he can make the point that I came to kill you, but don't throw your life away because I spared you. And like, I don't know that the movie explicitly tells us when he made up his mind. Whether it was,
see, I think he's still thinking about it.
I mean, it's entirely
when he goes in there.
I think until that the way that I read it was he said he has this, like, as long as he's 10 paces away from his enemy, we'll kill him move. I think the second the king literally tosses him his sword and is like, kill me then. And he turns around. This idea of turning away from the scene.
Great shot, by the way.
Excellent shot. And when that happens, the way I read it is that the second he saw that sword in front of him, that was when Nameless made the choice to not kill him. And he was also pondering, and I think also when the king said, Broken Sword, who was my enemy, understood me more than all of my counselors, everyone around me, right? Broken Sword understood that, right, Tianxia, the realm, right, the all under heaven, uniting China to make it China was more important than anything else. And I just have to recognize right now, especially with kind of what's going on with this idea of Chinese nationalism and the horrible things that are going on in the western part, Xinjiang. This is, in its essence, a nationalist argument, right? The nation is more important than separate states, right? And so I do want to recognize that this is also made in modern times, which has, unfortunately, a political bend when you're talking about keeping China, right? Based on the borders that the current government of China considers the borders of China.
Come at me, Chinese government. I think you suck, but Amy doesn't for reasons.
I need to study abroad there.
Yeah, so I know. But like, I mean, I'll probably never go there. So like, I will say this. The modern Chinese government will very rarely miss a chance to co-opt ancient Chinese history, culture into the modern, in order to legitimize themselves.
Such as the new Mulan movie that just came out. A lot of people are talking about that.
Right.
I do want to say, because I took a moment to look up that transcript that I was looking at last night, because I want to read what the actual translation is as opposed to what it says in the film, because I think it is important to get this accurate. For me, the moment that Nameless makes his choice, I think is when the king turns around and he's looking at the scroll and he's reading out what it, he says he's discovered what it means. And I'm just going to read it out. He says, this scroll of broken swords isn't about sword technique, but about swordsmanship's ultimate ideal. Swordsmanship's first achievement is the unity of man and sword. Once this unity is attained, even a blade of grass can be a weapon. The second achievement is when the sword exists in one's heart. When absent from one's hand, one can strike the numbers are, there's a number there, paces, even with bare hands. And swordsmanship's ultimate ideal is the absence of the sword in both hand and heart. The swordsman is at peace with the rest of the world. He vows not to kill and to bring peace to mankind. And I think that's the moment you can see Nameless really considering this. And I think that's when he makes his choice. And that great shot where he, takes his foot, steps on the ground and starts, flying up and towards him. And when I saw the film, I thought that he went ahead and killed him. And
me too, the first time I saw it. And I think they intend first-time audiences to think that. And if I could just say one thing, there's this idea of violence, right? When is violence justified? And I think what Broken Sword realized and what Nameless realizes is that, and this is not actually quite accurate surprisingly, of King Zhang, of the King of Qin, who became the first emperor, which is that in the movie they make it out is that all this violence is to unite China, is to make it a nation and to stop the warring states, because there's all this bloodshed going on. The only way to stop it is for all the states to just agree, we'll just be 7 states, or for one state to take over all the others. And this, the King of Qin decided that his way was going to be the way, which was just to take all of the other states over and to standardize everything and to become one people, united. And there's a very, very famous story called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, based on the Three Kingdoms period, another time when China was divided, in this case into 3 kingdoms, surprisingly. And the novel starts out with, China once divided must unite, and once united must divide. And that is kind of the history of China. It really is back and forth, right? There's this thing called the Northern and Southern Dynasties period, where the North was all one dynasty and there were 10 different dynasties in the South. So there's this idea that it must always come back and unite. And I think the Qin Zheng, right, the first emperor of Qin in this movie embodies that idea of, hey, we need to unite. It doesn't matter if we're going to divide later. We need to unite now and make ourselves an empire, right? That's the thing about the Warring States period. China had never been an empire. It had only been a kingdom or multiple kingdoms, right? So that's this idea of all under heaven, right? Of actually being a kingdom. This violence is necessary to make an empire. And that's, I think, what this idea of swordsmanship is about, is that a good swordsman, right, only uses his sword when it is necessary for the greater good. And in this case, for Nameless, the way to use the sword was to not use it and to not kill the king.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily agree with sort of the political ideals espoused in this film, but like, and I don't know if it's revisionist history saying like, well, Qin Shi Huang eventually did do some good things. He did, spread knowledge and cult and the predominant culture throughout the land, and facilitating the ease of communication led to a cultural and scientific boom for China. But yeah, this sounds like the Empire from Star Wars, we're going to crush all resistance.
Do you like Star Wars by any chance, Stephen?
I've heard of it. Hold on.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay.
Wow,
Yeah.
if only Micah were here to say
Shot-
it's okay. And
Shots
that.
fired.
Shots fired.
Except for
I'm actually
that,
a Trekkie,
except for
so,
that
but I
one
love you
movie,
guys.
which is kind of the low point of the franchise.
John, I'm not even going to let you finish. No. You're not. No, I'm not even going to let you go there. I know where you're going, and I'm not going to allow it.
Disallowed on his own channel. He just got 100 subs. Come on.
Okay, go ahead. Troll me, John. Go ahead. The Empire Strikes Back sucks.
I think that's being charitable.
Okay.
Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie, and
For
that's
the
the
re-
one movie that was done in cooperation with the Hong Kong Film Company. So, wow.
For
See how that works.
Yeah, everybody's piling on. Thanks, Kate. Hey, Alicia Kingston. Hi.
Hey, AK! So good to
Um,
see you. AK had a really great stream on Lovecraft Country today. Check that out. I love Lovecraft Country. She had Bonaro Geek on. Sorry, I'm plugging her because she maybe won't plug herself. But you did an amazing job, AK. I enjoyed the crap out of it today. I'm sorry, Stephen. Go
I
ahead.
haven't watched Lovecraft Country yet, but I would.
It's so good. Well, I'm a huge fan
on
of
the
horror
list.
genre,
It's on the
so I
list.
really enjoyed it.
Haven't got to it yet. Okay,
It's
but I don't know what else to say about the blue section. I really don't know that I have much else to say about most of the rest of this. We've covered the fact that there isn't you cannot trust any of the stories being told, and you don't know which one is valid until you get to the very end.
I think the green section, though, is important because it's a flashback. I say that with quotes, right? Flashback to when Broken Sword and Flying Snow attempted to kill the king 3 years ago. And so their kind of relationship was founded on this common goal of, killing the king and then returning home, right? And so, and I do believe that her father was killed by Qin troops. So there's also a personal, if I'm not mistaken, there's a personal, kind of commitment in that and investment in that. And so the green, right? If you remember at the beginning of the film, the king talks about how he had to take all of the cloth down because of the last attempted assassination. And we see that then in this flashback, green, and it's my favorite color. So I was like, this is great. Say green cloth everywhere. Just like, dude, this is not a good idea. Why is this here in the first place? But it's very stylistic, right? So when he's fighting Broken Sword is able to hide behind the cloth. And actually my favorite part in this whole movie happens during this scene where you see, it's a little bit like in a horror movie where you see the cloth go around what looks like, a person, but it's not. So that, Broken Sword is using this kind of swift, hiding kind of technique to get around the king. And it's kind of hinted at that Broken Sword could have killed him, right? He was able to do it. He had the skill to do it. And yet he did not do that. And this is also the rift between Broken Snow and Broken Snow, Flying Snow and Broken Sword. We allegedly there's a rift between them. We don't know why. We find out through the scene that it's because he didn't go through with it, and she was holding back all of these troops. And I guess if we're gonna go with gripes, okay, Flying Snow is literally standing there being like, no, and the troops are just behind her being like, with their spears, not actually attacking her. One gripe. They should have just attacked her and killed her. I'm just saying. But Flying Snow is amazing. So Flying Snow,
up until that point, the
so
fight scene was very realistic.
So he's holding back all of these, so that he can have a chance at the king, and he doesn't take it. And that is allegedly the rift between them, right? Is that Broken Sword, he was set up to do it and he didn't do it. And she doesn't understand why. And it's Broken Sword, even when he gives his spiel about All Under Heaven, she doesn't get it, like Nameless eventually. Yes. Thank you, AK. Yeah, that's me. It's the best. You missed a couple patriarchy drinks, Alicia, so if you want to just go ahead and do about 3 or so drinks, then you'll be caught up. So
but I will say that, I mean, that's sort of, I mean, this whole film is very sort of stylized in terms of its action sequences, beyond just the normal sort of wushu stuff where, it's set up right off the top when the emperor says, thousands of my soldiers could not repel them. It's like, oh, wow. But it works in a film like this. I just love in that scene where they're going through and they're basically just swiping aside all the soldiers. And
it's these characters are closer, and they're not analogous to, great Nameless, Flying Snow, Broken Sword. They are not, humans at the peak of ability. They are epic heroes like Gilgamesh, like Ulysses and Achilles. Like, they are a cut above what humans can even possibly hope to achieve, which is the fantasy aspect of this film. And I also love that it's called Hero. And while I don't necessarily agree with the politics, one of the greatest act of heroism in the film is for Jet Li's Nameless character to put the sword down and walk away, to choose non-violence.
And it's in the hope that he's passed that along to the emperor, which he said, I don't remember the exact wording, but he's like, never forget, those who gave their lives for the ultimate ideal of swordsmanship, which, the emperor himself has just revealed. And so, talking about the shots of Nameless walking away right after that moment, it's just, from an editor's perspective, it's so beautiful. You've got that, when it looks like he plunges the sword into him, and that reaction shot, and then he says those lines, and this is, let me go on a gripe my own. I waited for years for this to be corrected after the DVD release. Talking again about the subtitles, it wasn't a matter of mistranslation, it was a matter of timing. On the DVD release, they put in and your majesty will go on living before the camera panned down to show the sword hilt. And so I was like, no, that completely ruins that reveal. Thankfully, they fixed it. And so on the Blu-ray and digital releases, it's corrected. But that's brilliant, just that reveal. And then just the shot of him dropping the sword and the clanging, and then it cuts to the emperor, that turn that he does and that look on his face of shock. And then it cuts to Nameless walking away with that theme music again coming in. I've gone on and on about the music, but guys, I really love this soundtrack. It's beautiful.
You're not wrong. And I will say this, like, everybody who is in this film, I mean, I mean, even Donnie Yen, who's really only in basically one scene, they all get so much to do, and they all get to Jet Li's portrayal of Nameless is very sort of deadpan and neutral, and I feel like a lot of that is because in a lot of ways he's the self-insert character as well, as the sort of primary protagonist. But I'm going to look up his.
But again, and I think that also goes to what I was talking. Everything's linked in with the music for me, but really, it's when I got to go back and examine the music and how it relates to the characters, it became obvious to me that the composer did some really brilliant stuff with this. And I think it goes to Nameless being, he's certainly his own character, and
sure.
But he is so much a reflection of the other characters as well. The fact that his theme is not just his alone; it's informed by the other characters, but especially Broken Sword.
Yeah, but like the point I was trying to make is that the actor who plays the king of Chen, whose name is. I'm sorry, he plays the king of Qin, and his name is Chen Daoming. This guy is so good. I don't know why I have not seen him in other Chinese language films that I've seen. Maybe I have, and I just haven't necessarily recognized him because obviously he's got a very stylized beard and hair and all of that. But his portrayal, because he's got a wry smile once he figures out something. He plays it as very sort of like measured, and
he's very charismatic.
He is very charismatic,
which is really important because this is not a character who's, in theory, is someone you easily sympathize with or like or anything, just because of, I'll agree with you, Stephen. The politics of this film make me a bit uneasy. I'm not sure I'm really on board with sort of the final decisions that are, made by Nameless and, and all that. But damn if the Emperor isn't a really appealing character to watch. Mm-hmm. He's really interesting, as I said, charismatic. So you're sort of involved with him and you care about, whether he's going to live or die at the end of this, which I think is quite an achievement.
A little bit of spoiler by Chinese history that he doesn't, but
right.
Could I also just speak about the visuals for a second about stairs? And you guys may have noticed that he goes up to the emperor's right, or to the king emperor at this point. We're just going to use them interchangeably. Goes up right to meet him, and then after he decides not to kill him, goes back down. Right. The term that you address the emperor with, Your Majesty, is literally below the stairs, because you are always below the stairs addressing the majesty, the monarch who is up there, right? And it's literally Bi Xia, me who is below the stairs, talking to them. So what is so transgressive would be what Nameless does, which is lunge at him from the bottom of the stairs up to murder, right, or assassinate the king. And so this is something that would totally go over, when I first saw it, went over my head. A Western audience in general would go over their head. But to go from the Bi Xia, the bottom of the stairs, to try and kill the monarch in Chinese culture is a very transgressive. You are always at the bottom of the stairs, right? And they even say, no one is allowed within 100 paces of the king. And because Nameless allegedly murdered these 3 assassins, he is able to get within 10 paces of the king, right? He is able to get as close to the bottom of the stairs as possible. But there's still that like lines and lines of candles there, right? There's still this barrier in between the monarch and the ruler.
I love that these candles can sense your murderous intent.
These candles sense your murderous intent. The candles also are like a character of their own, honestly, in this movie, right? And so the candles are also, once again, another way to separate the monarch from the ruled. And I think that's what the visual of the stairs is really going for, is that Nameless is transgressing his role as a subject, right? By even being there, and then to get closer and closer, further transgressing.
I guess that would be a very sort of anti-Confucian thing because Confucianism is very concerned with everything fitting into its place.
Including women. You are meant to.
I mean, like, I'm not
silent.
saying Confucianism is 100%.
No, you're right. The ruler is the king is the king. The father is the father. The son is the son. It's a very, very. There are these set roles, and you play those roles.
Like you honor your king, even if he's a bad king, because the gods need to worry about the king. You need to worry about being a good you, and if you're a subject, you need to be a good subject. If your king is a crappy king, you don't get to do anything about that because that's not your job. Your job is to be a good subject.
Not quite, actually. In the Analects of Confucius, it does say if the king is being a bad king and is against his people, that the people have a right to rebel. That's actually very little known about the Analects of Confucius. It does. There's like one line there, and a lot of Chinese scholars just kind of gloss over that. It's like, not the thing. All right, go ahead and take that as the patriarchy. But yeah, so that's true. But yes, usually in Confucianism, I totally agree with you, Stephen. Usually,
okay, maybe it's better to say if your father is a bad father, you're still supposed to honor him and do whatever he says.
Exactly, you honor your father in
all
respects.
Terrible,
even if he's a bad dad. Exactly, but the ruler technically is the father of the people, and even then, he has more of a responsibility than even a father does. And so if he is shirking that responsibility, technically the people have the right to rebel. Yes. But it's very discouraged discouraged.
It's also like, I'm not going to try to go off on the mandate of heaven and all of that type of thing.
Oh, we didn't even get to the mandate of heaven. Oh my God.
We didn't even talk about the mandate of heaven.
I love the mandate of heaven. Not love it. I find it interesting. The mandate of heaven, really quick, is the divine right to rule, basically. It's the Eastern version of that. That the son of heaven, the emperor, has the mandate of heaven, and he can lose it by a lot of turmoil in the realm and a lot of floods, a lot of natural disasters. They can say, oh, the emperor has lost the mandate of heaven, therefore we can rebel. Huge part of Chinese history. Great job pointing that out, Stephen. Yeah, that's a good point, Leaf. I was actually wanting to talk about that scene. I believe she's talking about when he has attempted the assassination but doesn't go through it. And these counselors are literally like in the king's face being like, you can kill him or not. You can kill him or not. Which they would not be allowed that close. That's obviously very not historically accurate. If they just would have put them at the bottom of the stairs doing that, I would have no gripes with that scene. But yeah, Leaf, it's a little weird that they're like, sha, like, are we gonna kill him or not? It's like, dude, get out of my face. Like, they're in the king's like personal space at that point.
Yeah, and again, like I can sort of brush that aside because everything about this film is sort of so stylized. So at that point, it's the fact that they've got an assassin right there that they're questioning whether to execute him or not. So yeah, maybe not. Maybe a tiny little hole there, but I think that when a film is this sort of, again, repeating myself, but using the word stylized again,
it's film.
Yeah, exactly. So it gets away with it. I just want to pop up this shot because I freaking love it.
So this is as he's descending the stairs, right?
Yeah. So good.
Yes. And all of these troops are kind of making way for him.
But he's not getting out of there.
No, he's not leaving there alive, but he's going to walk with his pride to the gate and then turn around, basically, and face his death. It's a very solemn scene, but also one with great bravery, right? That's really what it is. One man standing alone, accepting his fate. It's a very interesting scene, especially considering that the historical figure Jing Ke basically died with 8 stab wounds, clutching his crotch. So it's like a very, very noble death that they give him in this. So yeah.
And then when the arrows are fired, and then we don't actually see the body. We just we just see where the body was, and then it cuts to his body in the casket or whatever being hoisted up. And but I do want to talk about what else is going on during this point in the movie, which is broken sword and Snow are waiting to find out what actually happened. And just the way that this is intercut with everything going on with Nameless, and again the music, and just as as the old man is riding forth, and brings up
the yellow,
the yellow, and it's blowing in the wind, and then Snow just bows her head and cries, and it's just, again, everything in this movie is just so masterfully pieced together.
Yeah, and she gives into her rage, and she fights with Broken Sword, but like the truth that the king was able to discern from the scroll that Broken Sword made, Broken Sword follows through with that in the very end as well. He puts the sword down.
Yeah.
Just as a way to show him, or not show him, to show her, Flying Snow, that he meant what he said.
Yes, it was. I took that the way to show her, I'm being genuine. This is a real reason. This is a real cause to die for, right? She believes that killing the king is the cause to die for. And he's saying, no, China as a nation is the cause to die for. And that's what I think. And so you see him just, and it's all on the wrist, right? Like we've been saying, Stephen, with sword fighting and with that, he just goes, doop. He just literally just moves his sword and dies because of it. And then they die together, and I bawled my eyes out during that scene when they die together. It's a little bit Romeo and Juliet kind of like.
Even before that, though, when he dies and she just screams in agony.
Attack. Yeah. She thought that they were just going to kind of duel it out for a little bit and then kind of go about the way they had been, which is a little bit have this kind of tension between them, right? About this fundamental disagreement. And the way, I also kind of, maybe I'm overreading into it, but I also kind of see it as Broken Sword kind of saying, like, this is the second disappointment for Snow. At this point, she's not going to understand what I'm about. I need to do something, like Stephen was saying, to show her that I'm serious about this, and that he gave his life for that.
Alicia, no, we've actually covered this. No, it is not our land. All under heaven. This is the
under heaven. All under heaven, aka say it before you go to sleep 50 times. All under heaven is the correct English translation.
Was it right after the mid-roll?
Yeah, we went off about it.
Maybe? But yeah, we actually covered that in pretty good detail. The one other thing I want to make for certain that I mentioned is that I learned some Mandarin. I learned that yes in Mandarin is sure. Sure. Yeah, sure.
Sure literally means it is. And then if it's not, well, sure, it's not.
Yeah, so. But still, like as like a Westerner listening to it,
sure.
It's saying yes on the bottom, and I'm hearing sure.
Sure. That's when I was teaching beginner Mandarin, that's how I had them remember it. They're like, yes, sure. Like it sounds a lot like that, right? It is. It exists. Sure it exists.
But when she decides to impale herself,
as they're embracing kind of
it's so great, but it's so
I'm laughing so I won't cry.
And then of course you gotta have Moon running up, but too late, and and it's just the whole thing is so agonizing and sad.
And Zhang Ziyi can just, the woman can act. She really can. Like, Western audiences maybe don't know her as well, although she's done plenty of movies that have been over here that have been released to Western audiences. Like, she's super famous in China.
Yes, extremely famous. Can confirm. She's like, at that time, she was what is now the Fan Bingbing of current Chinese, like very, very popular. Fan Bingbing was in an X-Men movie. I think that's as much American as she's done. But yeah, she was like very, very famous, like the Jennifer Lawrence of the early 2000s in Chinese film.
Because we talked about literally 3 films she's been in already. Not only this one, but also House of Flying Daggers and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. She's also in Memoirs of a Geisha.
Yes.
She was also like she played a villain in Rush Hour 2.
Yeah, the high point of her career.
Well, hey, Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker make a good combination. The Rush Hour films are, I mean, they're action comedies, but they're good. And she was
I actually really do love the first of those films. As a kid, it was definitely one of my favorites. So I'm not going to be too harsh on them.
But the woman can act.
Yeah. Also, I just want to say real quick, I hope it didn't come across, Alicia, like I was getting on your case about it. It's just, it was funny because we spent, a long time just griping about it. So
and talking about the larger implications on the ideas that are put in this film. It's definitely worth going back and listening to that part.
Especially because it was a great Amy rant about the historical and political implications about All Under Heaven. Yeah, sorry, AK, if we came off as like, no, you're wrong. It's just we had really covered that quite extensively. So we were like, no, but we've already talked about this, but obviously you weren't here. So,
but
can I actually ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
So we have them shooting a bajillion arrows at Nameless, and then we have them shooting a bajillion arrows at the calligraphy school. What is up with that? Like, the dude would have died from like 4 arrows, and like with the calligraphy school, like I kind of get because it's a bigger target. What is up with this barrage of arrows kind of symbol or imagery going on?
Well, I mean, the easy answer is, did you see what he did at the calligraphy school?
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past him, even without a weapon, to be able to knock away a barrage of arrows.
Okay.
So, like, the more arrows, the better. That's at least how I read it. It also reads like a unity of purpose.
Okay.
To me, like, if you're trying to unify China, you need all the people acting as one. And so I can see the soldiers representing the entirety of China acting as one. To eliminate Nameless, even while he willingly stands there to accept it, because he knows he needs for China to be one, he needs to be removed, or people like him who would assassinate the emperor need to be removed.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, these characters are pretty much like superheroes.
Mm-hmm.
So bring all possible force against them, and also it's kind of, I look at it as kind of being similar to that moment in Last Jedi when Kylo Ren's like, I want every weapon we have to fire on that man. And so it's basically making sure that they eliminate him.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I also kind of like Steven's analysis, though, of it as being one purpose, right? I also think it's doing a little bit like what Steven says, a little bit more than just like, let's make sure he's hella dead.
Yeah, and again, the film is, it's in keeping with the style of the film, where we're seeing this army which is acting as one, and of course they do also. It is also said earlier in the film that the King's Army never underestimates their enemies. So
also, Leaf says several bajillion. That is correct, Leaf. I was incorrect. It was actually not a bajillion arrows. It was indeed several bajillion. So thank you for that math correction. But it's a crap ton of arrows. That's another mathematical unit of a crap ton.
Yeah, a crap ton.
A crap ton.
Alicia is Star Trek versus Star Wars. Okay, so is there anything we didn't cover that you guys?
I mean, I'm sure there is. But like, we went places I didn't expect to go in this one. This was fantastic. Amy, it's almost like you know what you're talking about or something.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Because not only do I study Chinese literature, I also study Chinese cinema. So this Zhang Yimou is like a whole section of the class that I took on Chinese cinema during my undergrad. And I think maybe the takeaway from this film for those who haven't seen it yet. Hopefully you didn't watch this whole video, but whatever. If you don't mind spoilers, then you can watch this. But my main recommendation is to accept the wushu elements kind of like magical high fantasy elements and just kind of roll with the punches. And also, but I think also to understand a couple of the things I've touched on in the stream, the more important cultural aspects of it. I don't care that this isn't historically accurate, right? As long as it gets the cultural aspects right. And it totally does, with this idea of the guqin, the first fight scene where he's playing this stringed instrument, right? And then there's this chess house, this kind of thing, the idea of swordsmanship and calligraphy, or swordplay. I'm sorry, I don't want to say swordsmanship. Plenty of women are great with a sword, and plenty of non-binary and trans individuals are also great with a sword. So swordplay, this idea of the calligraphy of a person can be representative of them as a person using a sword, or in others, right? It's all being in the wrist. These are the kinds of things I think could only enhance your enjoyment of these kinds of films. And even though it sometimes feels like I'm giving a little bit of a Chinese history lecture, that's only because I care about these films, and I think that knowing these cultural elements, that we can we can really more appreciate these kinds of great films, especially when Zhang Yimou is making these films, he is very aware of these kinds of things. And just like my quick resume, I started learning Mandarin in high school, and I have an undergraduate and a master's in Chinese, and I'm currently getting my PhD in it. So yes, I have dedicated 11 years of my life to this, if we start with high school. And so, yeah, it's really great. And so I'm just hoping that these little cultural things that, Nessie, I am actually 3 pandas in a trench coat, is indeed true. So, for example, we want to talk about Kung Fu Panda, right? Like, I will give you a little bit of cultural aspect. We can still enjoy a panda eating dumplings, right? So that's my thing that I do also in my essays, which is I give you a little bit more kind of context around Western fantasy with some Eastern symbolism, not to ruin your life or ruin your reading of it, but to enhance your reading and appreciation of the work.
Calm down, Amy. You're here because you're great at Chinese, at like taking the Chinese cultural aspects and making us as Westerners understand them. That's why you're here, because you rock at that. Like, she's over here apologizing. I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm giving a Chinese history lesson. Dude, you're here because we...
Amy, I literally started this off saying, I guess we should start off hearing about some of the history. Amy, go.
But I'm just saying, you could totally enjoy this wushu film without any of this context I've given. But I think after you've watched this stream, you're going to enjoy it even more.
Or if you haven't watched it, maybe this will enhance your viewing of the first time. Or, and then after you watch it, come back and hear us talk in more depth about some of the stuff.
And I'm sorry, just one more thing. Because I started out a live chatter before as a content creator, got to give out a shout out to that chat. Kate, AK, Nessie, Leaf, Micah, Jolie was here earlier. I'm just scrolling up, making sure I know this. Anna, you were here earlier, and we love you all. And thank you so much for giving us your time to be here and talk about this with us. You are a huge part of the John Webster film, Unspun Yarn, and Here Be Dragons fam.
Yeah. Guys, and I'm just going to thank all of you again for just, the fact that I hit 100 subscribers during the stream really means a lot. And I just thank all of you guys for your support. I love you guys. And thanks for, watching, week in, week out. I really appreciate it.
We love you, John. You're worth it.
But yeah, I guess I'll start to close out by just saying it again, that this has for a long time been just one of my favorite films. And I think it was probably, in all honesty, probably one of the first sort of non-English language films that I really loved so much, and it probably got me interested in going outside of the box and really appreciating what we refer to as foreign language cinema, which is such an American thing, but
global, what is it, international?
Yeah,
cinema.
as the Academy is now calling it, yes,
They're so
international films.
woke.
But yeah, and the fact that this was followed so quickly here in the States by House of Flying Daggers, and then that just led to my interest in other films, from different countries. Like Pan's Labyrinth came out a couple years after that, and that's one of my absolute favorite films ever made.
That's another beautiful, fantastic movie.
Yeah,
It's a work of art, hands down. Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, and Stephen, I know that we've talked about doing that film as well at some point coming out.
Yeah, I wonder who else you could invite on for that.
I mean, I'm not trying to hog your channel, John. If there's other folks who want to talk about it, by all means, you ought to try to get somebody who
hog your channel. On the other hand,
you ought to try to get somebody who fluently speaks Spanish on for that one. And yeah, I might know a person or two.
It certainly won't be me. Which that is a completely unrelated stream in which I talk to you guys about the harm that was done by my second year Spanish teacher, who dismantled all the progress I made in the first year. But that's a story for another time. Yeah, I'll just say I love this movie. I think it's beautiful. It's tragic. It's emotional. It's just all of those things I love, and it honestly is probably my favorite film of the year that it came out. Yeah. Anything else you guys want to say?
Other than the only thing I want to say is that people die. People sacrifice themselves for all kinds of reasons: for friendship, for love, for an ideal. And people kill for all of the same reasons. That's like a quote from the beginning of the film, and it's really beautiful the way they illustrate every part of that core thought throughout the film.
And I think with the title hero, it starts out by saying there are heroes on both sides. And in the case of the Warring States period, that was absolutely true. There were 7 states, right, fighting each other. There was not, even though Qin won, that doesn't mean that there weren't brave and honorable people that were willing to sacrifice themselves in the other states. And so I think that's really one of the thrusts of this movie is recognizing sacrifice on all sides of a conflict.
They're heroes on both
sides. Wow, that was a great. Oh, I got a John sigh. Woo! Yeah. I'm gonna drink to that because I gotta finish this.
Okay, so just real quick, Amy, go ahead and tell people where they can find you, and maybe say again what you're working on.
Yeah, so once again, I look at Chinese literature and Eastern symbolism in Song of Ice and Fire and His Dark Materials, and I have maybe in the future some the Poppy War essays coming up. And so, yeah, we're going to have that Shade of the Evening Tree essay coming soon. And then after that, it's either going to be the Varys essay or the Bloodstone Emperor essay. We will see what happens. But all the links in the description. And it's Amy Blackfyre, AEMY, Blackfyre with a Y. I am not a Blackfyre loyalist. I'm actually a Targ loyalist. I just like learning about the Blackfyre rebellions, hence my fandom name. And I keep it simple and I keep it great. And please just check out a video and subscribe, do all the YouTube things. I really appreciate your feedback. On Twitter, in my polls, I am Amy Polar. I'm obsessed with your poll feedback. So if you follow me on Twitter, you will see my polls on what do you think about this content? Which content should I do next? Right now, I have almost 300 votes on a poll about the Shade of the Evening Trees, and it is almost a third tied. And I am ecstatic. So follow me and vote in all my polls because it is why I live and what is sustaining me right now.
And contrary to popular belief, she is not a Twitter bot.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes. I was the victim of the latest Twitter bot suite. Now I have given Twitter all my information, my email and my phone, so they know I'm a real person. So hopefully next time they do this, they'll actually get real bots and not me. And thank you all those that rallied behind me, Steven, John, Nessie, all of you guys that were behind me being like, what the heck, Twitter, please refollow Amy. But luckily they're all back. And I got a couple of new followers from that. So that was awesome. So yeah, follow me. I always have some great polls going around. Yeah, I of course love the Here Be Dragons fam. You guys have been so supportive. Also, Flores was in the chat. I'm sorry, girl, I forgot about you. You've all been amazing. Kate, Amy is the most realistic bot ever encountered. Yes, let's not forget about Jared, the doctor.
Jared is not an alter ego. Jared is a paid actor. He's
who
a paid
also
actor.
like season 8 and also Keira Knightley. I mean, I love Keira Knightley too, don't get me wrong, but like season 8, really rare, and then plus liking Keira Knightley. Put those together, Jared is John, John is Jared.
Jared, it'd be really helpful if you showed yourself.
Well, you paid him. You hired him for the Kira stream that you did with me. Also, check that out if you love Keira Knightley. John, me, and Jared did a Keira Knightley stream. 3 hours of talking about these amazing women in her films. And so that, I think John was able to afford that. But after that, he's not really hiring Jared that much anymore. So. Yeah. So Jared's probably looking for a job right now if you need an actor to pretend to like the same things you do. So
he's good at it.
Really good.
I will say that there was something that I forgot to let everybody know on the last stream, which is that Amy, the Knights of Kira now have a Tumblr blog, which has up to 100 followers on there. So if any of you guys are on Tumblr and want to check us out, here's the address.
We also have a Twitter, Knights of Kira. And where it's all about our queen and her amazingness, her great acting range, her gorgeous looks, and her general awesomeness. So we go all out.
This is very important information that I just want to make sure it gets out there.
Yes.
So next week I will be doing a stream, sadly, on the cancellation of The Dark Crystal, Age of Resistance. So you guys are going to see me quite sad and angry. And I'll be doing that with someone who I've known for a number of years, Cliff Broadway from theonering.net, also known as QuickBeam. So I'm looking forward to that. And so I'll be doing that. And then the week after that, I'm going to have a nice big panel to talk about the film Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World. That'll be with Kelly, Jaded Redhead, Lauren, aka Shakes of Thrones, and my wonderful friend Laura, who was on the Alien stream with me and Steven on Here Be Dragons.
And who's in our D&D group with me and Steven.
Yeah.
She's the best. She's our rogue.
Yeah.
So, sorry, go ahead, Steven.
I was just going to say, she plays a rogue in my game.
She's really good at it, I think.
She's very tricksy.
So some great stuff coming up, even though obviously next week is the stream I hope to never to have to do, but it's still going to be good to talk it out. So I want to thank you guys all again for coming, and thank you, Amy and Steven, for coming on to talk about this. It's been a long time coming. So
anytime, John. Thanks so much.
Yeah, for having us. Always here for you, buddy.
Especially when you're doing a Chinese movie.
You know what? Let me just say, come watch us dismantle and analyze Ghost in the Shell tomorrow on Here Be Dragons.
Yeah, the film that I shamefully only just saw.
Hey, better late than never. Nobody can see it at all.
I was just about to say that. Yep.
No shame. I'm not going to shame you at all. I'm just glad you got
to come to the enlightenment that is great anime movies. That's all we can hope for.
Yeah, which now I've been asking you guys for more recommendations, and Akira is actually coming out on 4K Blu-ray in December. So
I have a couple of Japanese movie recommendations, indeed.
Yeah, well, you can watch almost anything by Studio Ghibli too, like Princess Mononoke and.
Oh, you said my favorite one, Steven. Princess Mononoke is my favorite one of all of the. What is it? Asahiro? Oh, I can never remember his name. Kurosawa? Oh gosh, I have no idea. The director, the creator of all of those, who then does Studio Ghibli. Yeah. Yeah,
I actually have seen a couple of those. I've seen Princess Mononoke and
good stuff.
Also
Spirited Away.
Spirited Away, and there's one other one. No. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll definitely know if
Castle?
Yeah,
Moving
House Flying Castle. House Moving Castle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
By the way, the name you're looking for, Amy, is Hayao Miyazaki.
Miyazaki. Ah, okay. Thank you. Once again, I study China, not Japan.
It's eight.
Use that cop out right there.
Sorry, I was about to say a very, very stereotypical.
Yeah. Don't do it. Don't do it, man. Don't do
As a
it.
joke, but I'm not going to. Because yeah. Wow, that's not the note I want to end on. But yeah, tomorrow's going to be great. I can't wait to talk about the movie. I'm actually going to rewatch the film tonight in the original language with subtitles, because that's how
The only way to watch
that's how
it, you mean,
I
John? You mean
there's
dubs
the
don't
correct
exist
way.
ever? They're like, okay, whatever floats your boat, there's a correct way to watch any film, and that is in the original language with subtitles. And just get over the fact that you're going to have to read.
Yeah.
Unless you are a blind person, then obviously you need the dub version. But otherwise, you read those subtitles and you like it.
Oh, and one more thing I'm going to rant about. The Blu-ray for this film, Hero, the audio, the correct original language version is on a simple, like, old age DVD version, Dolby Digital track, while the English dubbed version has DTS lossless sound, super high quality. Who was in charge of that decision? Shame on you. Shame.
Where's my bell? I need my shame bell. Hold on.
Also, it would seem that John cares a little bit about physical media. I don't know if anyone's had. Is that like a thing, or I have no idea.
So I'll finish off by saying somebody, preferably Criterion Collection, get on releasing this film in 4K and put it out with the correct subtitles and high quality audio, remastered picture, and I will be one happy camper, and I think the other people in the stream will be happy too.
All under heaven or nothing.
Okay. Thanks again, guys. And Stephen and I will see you guys tomorrow. And thank you all for tuning in. Bye.